The simple state of court strategy. I believe there is, and I believe that smart people like Lawrence Korb was with the Reagan administration, John Murphy, our decorated congressman, have said, look, it's now time for the Iraqis to step forward. They've got to assume the frontline positions. They're not going to take the frontline positions until we begin pulling back. The American troops have got to vacate the frontline positions. The Iraqis, they're going to be incented to do this themselves. And they've got to take responsibility for their own destiny at this point. By the end of this year, we start bringing back our National Guard. We start bringing back our reservists. And over time, we want to do this. You're sort of rocking the boat. Well, baby, I think it's time that we started rocking the boat. I think that's what we need right now. As of next week, we're going for it. We're organizing, we're filing our campaign committee. I'm going to go out to as many towns as I can, and I'm going to tell the people why we're fighting for the heart and soul of the Democratic Party. We're going to get our website up, nedlamont.org, you name it. I need you guys to come on board. I can't do it by myself. I need people to sign up as volunteers. I need donations. I want to get out and meet as many of you and as many of your friends as I can. I've got to listen to what's going on from your point of view so that you have a senator who's here to represent your best interests and represent you in Congress. And I'll tell you, people tell us it's an uphill climb, but with your help, I think we can make a difference. I think we can send those Republicans a message they're going to hear loud and clear. And thanks for being here.
Had a $7 million war chest. That was his money in those days. And he just hammered away and hammered away. And finally, as the election came near, Rudy Boxer's pen, he sent out an absolutely stupid letter that alienated a lot of people. And I remember one person telling me, well, I've been a lifelong Republican, and I don't agree with Paul Wellstone, but I like the fact that he says what he believes. And I think that's what's needed in politics. We need people with some integrity to say what they believe and don't worry about the reaction.
Ned, I've known you for 34 years. I can see this coming, and I'm so glad that it's come to this point. The country's never needed you more. I think that parallel to looking at Paul Wellstone is a fabulous one. Joe Lieberman, for many reasons, should have been Paul Wellstone, and somehow he lost his direction along the way. But I see your character is a little bit different. I see it more of the inner confidence of an FDR. I just want you to stay our senator long enough and not wind up in the White House too soon. Because you have the confidence to say the right things, do the right things. The only caveat I worry about is the focus that I think probably all of us in this room share, which is everything you just said. Did that not be 100% of your campaign? That's a mistake that sadly I think that John Kerry and Wes Clark knew, is that Wes Clark could echo everything you just said brilliantly, except he had a tin ear to the domestic challenges too of this administration to go hand in hand for all the reasons you say. We have Peter robbing Paul here because of the war spending. Joe should have known better. You talk about the culture of corruption. Joe's on the wrong side of too many of the corporate governance scandals and on the reform initiatives that he blocked. Only John Edwards in the national election lightly touched on this. I think to the extent to which you 5% of your message can address this as well, I think you've got a career of integrity, and it's one of the few examples to stand out and say the business community doesn't have to be corrupt, and you're one of those models.
It really leads into my question, which is, are there some other domestic issues other than health care and domestic spying on which you think Joe Lieberman is dead wrong?
Well, I made reference to the energy bill. Let me talk about that for a few minutes. The energy bill was tens of billions of dollars of tax giveaways, mainly to energy producers. It was opposed overwhelmingly by most of the delegation throughout New England because it was so short on conservation. And I think we've got to we missed a heck of an opportunity after 9/11. The world was rallying to our cause, and it was at that moment that the president could have stepped forward and said, we're never going to be safe unless we end our dependence on foreign oil. And it was at that moment that we could have been much more aggressive in terms of coming up with incentives and coming up with a model that would allow us to free ourselves from that dependency. And we did just the opposite. You know, look what happened in the late 70s when after the oil shocks there. Look at the efficiencies we got and the conservation we got that was so good for our country really for the next 20 years. And it really shows you that you can make such a dramatic difference with an aggressive conservation policy that frees us from this energy dependency we have in the most dangerous parts of the world. So if you want another issue, that would be an issue that would be high, you know, on my list of priorities. And I would say, I mentioned just, I guess, in passing education, but, you know, I've had the good fortune to, you know, teach a course in entrepreneurship in a 100-year-old school in Bridgeport. And, you know, one of the things I see when people talk about education is that you got to have education that inspires kids. Build them a school where they will want to come, where there's sports and there's drama and there are other programs that can incent these kids to really want to perform. And we got to give them something they can dream for again. And right now, our kids are learning in this 100-year-old building, and there are more security guards and there are coaches in the hallways and throughout the school. So if I had a second priority, it'd be less emphasis upon testing and more emphasis upon inspiring these kids, getting back into the classroom and letting them know what they can do.
I know that the media has Alito already confirmed, but there is really a movement to filibuster. And I know there's a lot of local activists that are trying to put pressure on Lieberman and Dodd and perhaps have a rally in New Haven. Are you willing to come up for it if there is one in the next few days?
Let me know when it is. Let me tell you where I am on Alito. It wasn't a close call. You know, Judge Alito will tip the balance of the Supreme Court for the next generation. Judge Alito comes in there with an agenda. He has said, first of all, he wants to overturn Roe v. Wade, and he said that explicitly in his memos. And more broadly than that, you know, Judge Alito has this theory of what they call the unitary executive, which is the commander-in-chief trumps the separation of powers, is preeminent over Congress and the judiciary. I think this would be a very, this is something that deserves a lot more debate, let's put it gently, and the filibuster is the way we give it that debate, and I would support it. So let me know when your event is, and I'll see if I can do it.
Ned, you're a businessman, Fairfield County. I have two questions for you. One is, have you thought about how you might inspire the business community and the wealthier class in America to support something like HUD and housing programs around the country that are important in this city, Bridgeport? And also, we've had some bad news in Connecticut lately about jobs. And we've had manufacturing jobs such as Winchester, Vic, closing down. And we've also had service jobs. Some of the pharmaceutical companies cut a few years ago. And now 800 jobs at Stop and Shop Distribution Center. And another distribution center, Filene's. So I'm wondering if you've thought at all about maybe where Connecticut is headed as far as its job creation effort, and how you as an entrepreneur see the federal government might be able to assist.
Well, a couple of pieces to that. First of all, how do we get the business community involved in a productive way? One of the things that why I'm enthusiastic about the healthcare debate is I think it's something that employees, employers, labor and management can come together on, because it's those same dramatic healthcare increases in costs that are hurting the employee and the employer alike, and they're on the same side of that agenda. I really believe that we're going to end up with a universal affordable health care that has federal subsidies for those that are most in need, take some of the burden off the employer, and allow us as a nation to better compete with that as part of our strategy. Secondly, today I got involved in the Bridgeport schools. I took 50 CEOs or 25 CEOs up to the school. Each and every one of them got involved in a different facet of the school system. And some of them stayed involved, some of it was a look and see. You know, I stayed involved. But it gets to your other question, which is we've got to better integrate our education system with where our long-term strategic economic future is going to be in this country. If it's pharmaceuticals, you know, where are we at UConn and Yale in terms of complementing what they need in terms of a workforce going forward? And to the degree to which I, as a senator, can help play a role in that in terms of providing support to the university system and bringing the university and the business community together so they have a 10-year strategy that we're working together on the same side of the aisle, that I would do.
I think we all know that Ashcroft and Bush were able to push the USA Patriot Act through so quickly and easily because of an overwhelming fear in America. Now, there are many unconstitutional elements in the act, but I think we're all pretty much aware that we're not all that much ready for another terrorist attack. So how do you propose finding that balance between freedom and security?
The president says that his wiretaps were legal and necessary. You know, I believe that they were illegal, but very possibly necessary. I think when I see the way he takes it upon himself to interpret the Patriot Act and the so-called authorization for war and say he has carte blanche to institute these wiretaps with absolutely no authority, judicial authority or otherwise, that is what reminds me why we need to tighten up the Patriot Act and make it more specific. And as part of tightening up the Patriot Act and making it more specific and letting the president know where he can and can't go, we're going to be allowed to draw that balance, if you will, in terms of our civil liberties and electronic surveillance. But your other question, you're absolutely right. Under the right circumstances, electronic surveillance is just so key to our national security, and we have to do it right, and I think getting the Patriot Act right is the first step in that direction. Does that answer?
Yes. What I find is that Senator Lieberman and Senator Dodd, they don't come around to talk to the people. They don't come around to listen to the people. I called their office several times and suggested they come around and have a town meeting and let the people answer some questions. And the response you get is they don't have time. Or people with the gripes, only people with gripes will come. And then you send them an email. They never answer an email. I've never received an email answer from them yet. And occasionally you'll get a letter like 9 months after you've questioned them on something. So I think you've got to get out to every corner of the state, every small town, and to let the people know who you are.
Well, I'm going to go to every small town I can. I've got 6 months to do it, but I'm going to work it as hard as I can. But to your other point, it just seems to me that our senators and congressmen stay in Washington too long. It's like a lifetime occupation down there. And every year they're down there, they're one more year distant from the folks that elected them. And at some point you start getting taken for granted. At some point you just punch the clock when it comes to re-election time. And I don't think that's what the Founding Fathers had in mind when they talked about a citizen legislature. Folks that come from the community here, they spend their time in Washington, they come back on weekends, they stay in close touch with people, they listen, and whether you agree or disagree, everybody has a chance to say their piece, and at the end of a period of time, you go home.
Mitch. Hi, my name's Mitchell Fuchs. I'm Democratic Town Chair in Fairfield. Speaking to this point, I actually met with the senator, with a group of town chairs. We, as a town chair, you dedicate hundreds of hours of time to community service, to political service. When he and I had a disagreement, he basically said, he absolutely said that he has a 70% approval rating, and he doesn't care what we think. Now, it's one thing if I were asking him to, if I were dictating to him what I expect him to do. But I think in a course of dialogue, we can have a conversation and agree to disagree without hearing from him or his staff that he doesn't care what we think. What kind of a representative is it that would say to a group of hard-working volunteers that he has no interest in their opinion? He knows better than us all. That's why I'm here today. I'm here today because I am outraged that a United States Senator would say to one of his constituents who dedicates hundreds of hours a year to the service of the political party, to my community, and to him, and he doesn't care what we think. That's an outrage.
Before we carry on, I want to speak to what Mitch just did, because the senator's rating is no longer in the 70% range. In fact, if I wrote an article last week for a blog called myleftnutmeg.com. I don't know if you've seen it, it's a good one, and the piece is called "Is Joe Vulnerable?" And what I did was look at the Quinnipiac poll that came out earlier this month. And basically, there's some really interesting messages there. Number one, the senator's popularity has fallen by 11% over the last year. And that's amongst all voters, 11%. And then when you begin to peel back the onion and see who's for him and who's against him, well, the for hims are the Republicans and the unaffiliated, and the Democrats are actually not so much for Joe as they used to be. They're down in the 50s. And then when you start to peel it back and look at the liberals versus everybody else, is 47-47 in terms of do they want him to be returned to power. So in a Democratic primary where we exclude Republicans and unaffiliated, and where we have a chance within our own house to decide who it is that's going to represent us in Washington, we have a real shot in an August primary to get rid of this guy if we all pull together. So if you see these articles that say Lieberman has overwhelming support, it's true in a general election in November when Republicans could vote and unaffiliated could vote. He could probably easily carry the day. In a Democratic primary, it's a toss-up, and we need to go forward with that message to everybody. So let's take some more questions. Yes, sir.
Just a couple of comments. I think I heard on the radio a day or two ago that Senator Dodd actually is come out in support of the filibuster against. The other thing I wanted to say was that just a memory that's seared on my mind is after the State of the Union address either 2 or 3 years ago, the President was walking down the aisle and coming out. He got this big bear hug from Lieberman, or vice versa, I don't know which, but I mean, it only lasted a second, but it's indelibly.
It's captured on some
That's
buttons
the
that are in the hall there. We call it the kiss.
Yeah, right. It was fantastic.
Sir.
Yeah, I wanted to follow up on your response to the question about the Patriot Act. Are you saying that you don't think the FISA statute as is sufficient? At the moment, he has 72 hours to get a warrant after wiretapping, and the standard is probable cause.
Well, it sounds
I
to me like
heard you
the
saying
FISA
that maybe
Act
we
is
needed to
more than
loosen that
adequate.
up, and I just wanted to make sure I understood your position.
I believe the FISA Act is more than adequate. I believe that he did not pay attention to the FISA Act, and that's possibly illegal and probably should be investigated. You know, beyond that, in the Patriot Act, I just was saying that I think we ought to tighten up other provisions in there to make sure there's no loose interpretation in terms of what the president can do and not do.
You mean, as in the definitions of terrorist activity and those elements?
I mean, in terms of anything that could be an ambiguity that would allow the president of this administration to interpret that broadly in a way that would infringe upon our civil liberties.
Isn't that the whole thing?
Marilyn.
I was curious what you said earlier about senators and congressmen spending too much time in Washington. Are you for term limits?
You know, that's a good question. I'm certainly for a term limit for myself. I wouldn't, be there more than 2 terms. And I really believe that these guys are there. It's a lifetime occupation. That's part of the whole culture of cronyism that we have. You know, whether Massachusetts should not be allowed to send Teddy Kennedy there for 1 more term, under state statute is something I've got to think about. But let me tell you, as a pledge for myself, I think my term should be limited. 2 terms, I think that's enough. It's, 8 years for the president. I think that's, well, I don't know if that was enough in Bill Clinton's case, but yeah.
You mentioned you're going to have a website up, NedLamont.com, I guess, up next week, right? What are some of the, reading some of the other websites, there seems to be a tremendous amount of interest, not only in Connecticut, but nationwide on this race. What are some nuts and bolts things that people in this room can do on Monday, when your blog goes up, or Tuesday, or whenever it is, that you would hope that they can do in terms of volunteering, or here?
Go to NedLamont.com, sign up, and then from there, find us other people that will also come to that site. What we're trying to do is we're trying to put together a network of activists town by town, so as I get out to these communities, there's people there I can meet with, find like-minded people, and we start building a ground game towards the convention and more importantly towards the primary afterwards. Secondly, we're going to start putting issues up. And the issues come with them a blog. I'm trying to get some conversation and debate going on some of these pieces. And over time, we try to generate, this is an issues-oriented campaign, we generate some interest and excitement there. And thirdly, I'm going to need help on the financial side. So, as we get this committee formed, there'll be an opportunity for people to give donations. I'm not expecting big donations. I don't think the big donors can come out for an insurgent campaign like this. But I do want to get broad-based support from as many people as I can in this state and beyond to show that this is a campaign that's got legs and energy and people support it.
I'm on the Democratic Town Committee in Westport and absolutely delighted that you've come into the race. Talking about memories, I remember 45 years ago as a college student listening to, I believe it's your grandfather, Corliss Lamont.
Great uncle.
Oh, great uncle. Great man. And made quite an impact on me. The issue that I'm particularly interested in, beyond all that you've actually spoken to, is the issue of job creation and the role of entrepreneurship in job creation. And beyond a university business coalition and a common strategy of helping people move from learning to earning and a coordination of educational policy and business, do you have anything formulated as yet about how to actually create jobs? Because politicians talk about job creation all the time. They have not got a clue as to how you do that. And when you take a look at post-World War II economic phenomenon in this country, jobs are created primarily by startup companies that grow into larger organizations ultimately. And, of course, the small businesses and smaller companies, the micro businesses. So is that something that you hope to talk to? And if you need any assistance in the campaign, you can count on me because I've got lots of ideas about how to do that.
Thank you. I'd definitely like to follow up with you on that. Just one general observation as a small business person, and it's something I'm going to flesh out over the next few months. But we continue to cut taxes in areas that don't help small business. We continue to raise taxes where small business is most penalized. When I say that, I mean the payroll tax. It's the most regressive tax in this country. It penalizes employees, and it penalizes employers, and it discourages employment. And I'd say healthcare costs is another tax upon employment. And one of the things you want to do if you want to create employment and allow entrepreneurs to flourish is you've got to reduce the cost of employment so that people can take that risk and hit the ground.
Okay, one more question.
I just kind of want to follow up on the small business entrepreneurial tack that we were on. When a business grows to a certain point, they get large and they become multinational perhaps. What are your views on the trend that's happening now with the outsourcing and the loss of manufacturing jobs and the impact on labor in this country?
And the shutting down of businesses and moving overseas or whatever. These entrepreneurs, they get big enough, they're gone.
Well, a couple of things. One, I'll take it back to healthcare. I'll take it back to the cost of employment, to that previous questioner. And one of the reasons that, as I said in my talk, small business loses jobs to fly-by-night operations that don't even offer healthcare. I think as an employer, you have an obligation to provide a level of healthcare. And I think we ought to have federal subsidies that help support small and mid-sized business in terms of their health care costs, because as you point out, one of the reasons the companies are going offshore is because it's cheaper to employ people offshore, and health care costs are one of the reasons behind that. So when I talk about leveling the playing field, that from a strategic sense is what I'm talking about. I also think that leveling the playing field has got to be part of our trade agreements. It's got to be part of our bilateral relations with countries around the world so that we can help them build up a strong middle class with rights for labor, just like we have in this country. That's great. Thank you, John.